Hey, it's been a while. It's been pretty busy on my side, so it's taken a little while to actually come up with a good video that's worth sharing with the audience. I think probably most of the time has really been spent on some of the new and exciting tools that we're building in-house, and hopefully we're going to be able to showcase those to you at some point in the near future. So, a lot has happened since the last video I made, and I am pretty excited to just be able to share some of the stuff that's going on. I would say one of the coolest features that is on the verge of being released with Beta 17 is really focusing a lot around the shared system. So, as you know, shared is the very layman's term solution for Module Federation plugin. Under the hood, it actually consists of overrides and overridables. Federation brings those two together, so it's just easier to configure. In the latest release, what we've actually gone and done is pretty much rewritten all of the sharing mechanisms that are under the hood, and it's really going to open up a huge amount of power that we haven't seen or even thought of being able to have before. You might have noticed that I've created stuff like the Automatic Vendor Federation plugin, and pretty much what has now gone to the webpack core is heavily inspired by the external feature that I had written that some of you may or may not use. I know in my demos I actually have quite a couple of them that use Automatic Vendor Federation. So I'm very happy to say that that plugin isn't really needed that much anymore as soon as the next webpack beta comes out. So what I'm really going to go through is just one aspect that's available. The sheer number of changes and capabilities that are coming out in the next release of webpack is far too dense and far too large to really cover in what I hope will be a somewhat short video. So we're really just going to focus in on the sharing system that we currently have up and running. The whole shared mechanism system, and a lot of what I may or may not dive into throughout this video, is going to be highly focused around advanced implementations. So I would really not recommend digging into the folder that I've created in Module Federation examples called Advanced API. Honestly, just because if you don't know anything about Module Federation, that's not where you're going to want to start. You'll mostly, and for most of you, you'll probably be able to get along just fine using the current API that's out there. However, for users such as myself and other big corporations that I work in collaboration with, we need significantly more power. And Module Federation already provides us a ton of power out the box, but I need a whole lot more capabilities to really scale this to, say, a couple hundred repos or a couple thousand developers, or a couple hundred repos on a single page powered by a couple thousand developers. And if you've dug into this or you're working on highly dynamic projects or anything like that, you might have already flagged some of the risks, or if you've even been in our GitHub issue page, you might have seen or commented yourself on one or two of the question areas. I know with vendor sharing in general, it's been a very common question of, well, what happens when there's two different versions? And we've really pretty much covered that, but it involved manual labor on your side. So really what we're going to focus on here is the absolutely gorgeous upgrades to the sharing mechanism and the power behind it that you can now have. So let's just get into it. First, that's what we pretty much changed. So a lot of new code was written here, but if you dig down through here, you're going to see a couple familiar names, such as we have Container Reference plugin, we have Container plugin, and we have Module Federation. And we used to have something called Overridables plugin that was actually under the hood in Module Federation. So the whole Module Federation suite that you use as a high-level user really consists of that, and now this. Shared plugin is a complete and total rewrite on the overrides mechanism, and it did require a significant amount of work to actually go into changing the webpack core. As of right now, looking at the pull request we have open, I think we're sitting at about 160 files changed. So that just gives you an idea of the complexity and the scale of the stuff that we have to actually alter to bring something that may or may not seem trivial to the end user. So what we've got now is the shared plugin. The shared plugin goes off into provide shared plugin. Inside of there I have things like provide shared module and provided module. The provided module also happens to be the fallback mechanism that we use under a new plugin that we created called consume shared plugin. And you will see the insane amount of interconnects that we have running between everything here. One of the really cool parts that we can kind of see just from this image that I have up on my screen is through this, complicated diagram, we have created the capability for remotes to share their own vendor code with other remotes. And that's something previously that you couldn't really do. If you wanted to achieve something like that, the general thing you'd have to do is either kind of monkey patch it or create your own mechanism to redistribute shared code between remotes and other remotes. Or the general practice that we've mostly been following up till right now has been, well, you have a copy of it installed in the host. The host overrides the remote, and that's how you avoid duplicate downloads. But we quickly reach a limitation there in the case of what happens when A is the host and B and C are remotes. A does not have Lodash, but B and C do have Lodash. What do you think is going to happen? What's going to happen is they're going to both load a copy of Lodash. Even though it's technically available, you're still loading two copies because the host was the override controller. So if the host didn't have it, you had to bring your own, even if somebody else had it on the page. This is something I've spoken about in varying degrees of seriousness, but a long-term goal has always been that I want to create cross-remote queries. If anybody can serve the dependency within the range of compatibility, I want to tap into anyone who has it and get it from them. I don't just want to depend on the host, and I also want to build in redundancy capabilities where if something were to break, I could simply go, hey, does anybody else on the page have it? Give me yours. And that's kind of what just some of this stuff does. So, there's the nice big image of it, and it's definitely worth going and checking out the issue that Tobias has opened. But let's actually just see what it looks like. So, the one awesome area I want to cover is dynamic containers or dynamic remotes. You might be in the case where you have something, let's use Grafana for instance. You have a Grafana dashboard, and that Grafana dashboard doesn't know what's going to be installed. So what you end up having is the predicament of how do I actually know what remotes are going to come down the line. And the reason that this is actually a problem I can articulate relatively well. And what actually happens is when you do something like this, app2/button. So when you do something like that, what Webpack sees is we actually break this into something that's kind of like this. I mean, the syntax isn't correct, but you'll get the concept. So we break it down into scope, and we break it into the request. So that's what you end up having, is this gets converted into something that looks like that. So now what this tells Webpack is, here's some metadata on what's going to happen. The big problem that we have generally faced up till now, or beta 17 when it drops, is you get a whole lot of fancy stuff happening when you run this import. So if you've used Webpack before, you can't require something that doesn't return something else. I can't just have a blind import that doesn't do anything. So what happens under the hood here is this import actually goes through a special dependency factory and runs through a whole factorization system that spits out very customized dependencies and very customized modules. So what this actually returns is something called a remote module. Now inside of that remote module, what ends up happening is we're able to take the shared context that you've provided in shared, and we're able to say, okay, cool, I know who's going to use it, it's app2, and now I can say, alright, awesome. So in this import, what actually happened under the hood was we would have a factory function in the middle of it that would say, cool, scope app2.override, pass the host overrides into it, and then the rest of the request actually run and get that request from the remote. So if you don't have this and you're using a totally dynamic system, Webpack has no idea what you're going to do, and it doesn't know who it needs to override or how. So that's been a painful problem. The workaround that I use in Webpack 4 and in other various places is something like this. So it works just the same, but pretty much what I had to go and do is say like scope or global scope, could be window, could be require, could be global, global this, whatever you're using. Window's just the easiest to explain this. So window.ab tests, which over here, if I go back, here's what that would look like in the normal universe. A/B test slash, what am I actually going to go and get? Let's find one. Okay, cool. Let's get this. So let's assume in our A/B test repo we have something like that. Boom. So that's what it looks like. But what ends up happening under the hood, at least in the browser, is we go window.abtests.override, and we actually pass in the overrides that you would have specified inside of Module Federation plugin. So that all happens under the hood, but if you don't have this, we don't know what that is. It's unknown. So how do we know how to override it, when, where, or how? So this is the problem that we start to see unfold when you want totally dynamic remotes. As such, and with great enthusiasm from the community and frustration from myself, we have decided to actually implement a capability that isn't necessarily a one-line syntax like this, but it sure as hell is not, that. Especially because I already shared React, so it's super redundant to have to do it again inside of here just so that you can pass the overrides correctly. But that's a good workaround, and this also works great for Webpack 4. This code here is actually the backport for Webpack 4. But we had to apply the same override mechanics either way because there was no parser from Webpack that could parse the imports because you don't provide imports up front. So that gives you a brief overview. Over here, this is our dynamic system host example. Basically what this does is it lets you require code on demand, so I can say, cool, do something like that. Here's the scope, here's the module I want, and that's the remote entry I'm after. So that lets you just inject things on the fly as needed, and it's great right up until you actually need to share stuff. So this actually works out of the box right now, but as soon as I use a React hook, everything falls over because 2 copies of React are on the page, and just general scale problems and bloat issues. Based on the current system of how this works, we've effectively made nothing any better. So we have internalized a lot of that now. So what I'm going to do now is pretty much hop over into this dynamic remotes section under the advanced API, and what we're going to do is see something a little bit more digestible. So overall, this took maybe 20 minutes to write, and all I did was go through the commit history and stitch together like which branch I can actually pull from that has enough of the features that we've designed inside, a branch where I'm actually able to execute and at least give you guys some kind of a demo up front. A lot of the things that are coming along, which I may, I'll try to go over, but a lot of the things that are coming along you can't actually use because they're bound across like multiple different random branches within Webpack. So it's real hard for me to actually showcase a single feature. This one, on the other hand, has had a couple merges up into it, and it's kind of an end-to-end capability. So it's a perfect scenario to write some code to show you here's what you can use soon, or if you want to go for the old reliable pattern of just switching your get URL, you can see here that Webpack is actually using the get URL for Webpack, and I'm just pulling off of the Module Federation refactor overrides branch, or overridables. So, with that said, that should give enough context. Let's go look at app 1 under these dynamic remotes. So I'm going to cd into it, and I'm going to go ahead and yarn start it. That should bring it up. Cool, looks good to me. Alright, so before we actually look at the code, let's see what the code's doing. So in here, I've got a basic setup. I have app 1, and inside of here you'll see this load component, and if you were paying any attention to me earlier, here's load component that we had before. Works perfectly, but there's no way you're going to share stuff in there. So now over here I've taken the exact same concept, but I've created the capability to actually pass the shared scope from the host to a dynamic remote. So what we have is the addition of webpack init sharing, and we have this thing default. Keep default in the back of your mind for right now. I'm going to get to it later, but there's some really cool stuff that comes from just this capability right here. The second thing I do is I've got the scope that I'm going to use. So container equals window.app2, whatever. So I grab the container, and now this is what gets really awesome is the remote entry containers now accept an initialization property. So before, all you could actually pull off of a remote entry was get and override. But this had a lot of limitations because how would you do something like set the public path dynamically? Typically what we suggest is you just hard code it into webpack. It doesn't work very well for a lot of people. So this initialization stage, with right now all I'm doing is actually passing in the scopes, but the initialization stage here you could technically pass anything into the runtime before you start requiring stuff. So you could pretty much rewire a remote's webpack runtime on demand before I actually consume any modules out of it. Case in point, setting public path to something else. So, I grab the container, I say cool, container, await, initialize. I initialize the container with webpack share scopes default, which is something that gets magically created from here. After that, we have the usual factory setup that you would have where I go and actually get the module. The module probably isn't on the page, so it follows a similar kind of code split convention, or the dynamic import convention. I retrieve the module, I then factorize the module, and I return the actual code that you want. So that's really the big change here. Everything else I don't actually remember changing. So that's all I changed. And that's what app 1 it has. App 1 in this scenario is the only one actually loading remotes. So you could apply it to more locations than one, but I copy and pasted one of my other examples, so that's what you get for right now. Let's look at app 2. And if I did not already, I want to quickly just show you app 1's webpack config. Alright, extra standard. All I did was add some comments here, and we're just sharing React and React DOM like usual. So you can see shared really didn't change that much under this specific scenario. But each of these apps uses a more advanced API implementation than the previous. So we're going to look at app 2. I'm going to go into app 2, standard app. I'm going to go into widget, which is kind of what this whole system loads, and I'm going to get moment here. Now you noticed over here in the host build, I don't share moment. So according to the current beta that's available to you today, that means, and it's totally fine, but that means widget will load moment for itself. And if I go and look at the webpack config here, things get slightly more interesting. You'll see I have shared, and I'm going to share React DOM, and I also share React. But check this out. React isn't just a string anymore, or an array. I can pass it an object, and I can actually specify, well, what's the import that I want? And also, what's the share key that I'm after? Do I want to import React and share it as React, React-something? This is really great when you think about versioning, managing multiple versions, because I can actually pass the override key as something different than the word React. Then we get this cool thing called share scope. So this is really what you saw over here in my first app that we were going through as default. So what that means now is I can actually create scopes for vendor overrides or just module overrides in general between different federated systems. So if I don't want shared applied to everything, I can actually put it almost like how you would have split chunks and how you'd have groups or chunk groups within there. You can do the similar kind of thing here where I can actually give it a scope and say, all right, cool, React DOM, whatever, I could put them under a shared scope called, say, React Stuff. And then when I'm working with another React app, I could actually initialize the container system up here with something other than default. Like I could say React Things. And now what would happen is I would actually initialize a different set of overrides compared to, say, other applications. So if I go back in here, nothing's going to work. But if I did that, it would now only actually share things under the correct scope. I think by default, the scope is default. So unless you provide a customized shared scope, it's just going to share everything. But this is extraordinarily useful when you have certain things you don't want to override. They might have side effects, they might have certain state conditions, or symbolic links within the actual code execution and in-memory system itself. So it's really useful to actually say, hey, I actually don't want to share this. So that allows you to categorize what you're sharing and how. I'm going to set it back to default. And then another really cool thing we have on here is Singleton. So what Singleton is really great for is I can't have more than one copy of React on the page. But now I can actually control that through more than just setting the string as React, but I can control it through an advanced API where I can say that this is a Singleton. Only one module, only one version of this module is allowed to be shared ever. And that's what I need under certain conditions, such as React. So that's a very brief glimpse into how the new mechanism works. You know, we have a couple things here. One of the things I didn't really touch on is moment. So moment, I can now actually give it a semantic version range. So why this is really cool, and in application 3 we actually dive a little bit further into it, I believe. But before you, with like automatic vendor federation or something, it would just be moment and then moment dash whatever the version was that you pluck out of the /node module /moment /package.json value. And that works out pretty well, but it also has some pretty big limits on it because in my version I had something like I can ignore the patch. But what happens if moment, 2.24 and 2.25 do just to fine a job? There's no breaking changes in between them, so you actually don't mind sharing between hosts or between remotes 24 and 25. So the way that this mechanism will work is it's exactly like how NPM would work. We have the little caret here, which means that this app needs at least moment 2.24 available. But if another remote or another host has moment 2.25 available, according to semantic versioning and how it all works, it will know, alright, cool, I will just depend on the latest available version that falls within my semantic restrictions here. You can also set it to be an exact version if you need it to for certain scenarios, but it gives you a lot of powerful use cases and a lot of flexibility where you really do have less duplication because you can now specify the range in which something will work. And again, this is still just a very small sliver of what the shared mechanism can do. So that's app 2. Everything else is normal. Now what we're going to do is look at app 3. And I'm going to look at the webpack config that I have in here. And in here, it's also nothing too out of the box, but I have React and React DOM. And then in here I have a brief explanation on moment. And pretty much this adds moment as a shared module. The version is inferred from the package.json, and when we say package.json, it is not the package.json that you type in. It's the package.json that moment.js published to NPM. So if you have an old copy of package.json, or you have the little caret on it and the actual installed version is a few ahead, we don't parse what you have in your package.json, we parse what's in the node modules directory in package.json of moment itself. So we get extremely accurate version statistics and version capabilities based not on what you last typed into a string, but what's physically sitting inside your node modules. We actually know the versions of your dependencies directly from their source. So the cool thing here is if we look pretty much at this, it'll use the highest moment version available that falls within a range. So, 2.20, which I suppose would actually be 2.24, and anything under 3. So now that gives me the capability to work within a much wider range. I can have multiple versions of moment where all that we do is they add features, they don't add breaking changes, and what happens is how all the remotes will behave and operate is they will depend on the highest version available and use the highest version that falls within their semantic versioning allowance. So now you actually can have an older copy be loaded here and a newer copy be loaded by a different remote. That remote will actually help you override the older moment version that's here to ensure that they're all using the latest, most compatible version between themselves. And you can totally control this through any various setup. If we go look at our good old PR over here, it'll give you some examples. So, I can also get real specific and I can say I require this version specifically. I can specify the version of the module that will be shared. I can set if it's singleton, and I can also set if it's strict. And if it's strict, it means that it will load exactly that version down to the T. For required version or the version that you've seen, you'll see you've got the caret, you've got the little squiggly line, and you actually have the, is that greater than or equal to? I think it's greater than or less than or equal to. Either way, you have the stuff you have in NPM. You have what you would put in your package JSON anyway, except now you're controlling this dynamically across a distributed system where you can have multiple remotes either use the latest version available that matches what they're capable of being, operational with, or you can actually scope things in and out of the sharing capacity, which is really, really neat. Alright, so we're going to start up dynamic remotes again. And here's what we've got. Looks very similar to our dynamic system host example that you've probably seen before. That's because I copied and pasted it. The only thing I did was I swapped out a bunch of capabilities under the hood so that it's using the latest webpack API that is not yet released. So if you try this on NPM with the webpack version 16 out there, you're not getting this. This is coming from a pre-release branch and I'm loading stuff right off of GitHub. So now that we have this up, let's just see what we've actually got here. I have main. I get React DOM, pretty standard. I have my little Bootstrap mechanism back, and the main reason that I actually have reintroduced Bootstrap is because how the new sharing system works is we weren't really able to avoid it as effectively as possible. So import Bootstrap has use cases. I've already said that import Bootstrap is fantastic for things like server-side rendering or synchronous imports, but it also is really helpful under advanced sharing conditions. So if you wanted to get around, say, having to use an import Bootstrap, you could probably use something like HTML Webpack plugin or whatever, and all you would actually want to do is make sure that these initial chunks that come with the app, like React, are actually just in the HTML. The only reason that the mechanics don't work without import Bootstrap in this scenario is because they're not loaded on the page and we've drastically increased the capabilities that you have at hand. So the easiest way is to either put these in your HTML and have them there from HTML Webpack plugin or from, say, chunk flushing with SSR or whatever you want. Just you can either load them in the page or you can use the Bootstrap mechanism, which can be either at the head of the app or lower down in the app, which pretty much lets us hold up the execution and we can hoist additional requirements into that promise. So Bootstrap's kind of the blanket coverall that handles everything, which is why I always use it. Alright, so there's our app. Nothing special. Typical app. Now remember, this host over here does not share moment. There's no moment, and I'm pretty sure I don't even have moment installed. There's no moment. So what should end up happening is I'm going to load widget 2, and it says moment shouldn't download twice. The host has no moment, which is true. So if I look in here, I'm going to see some very unshaken moment files. Perfect. So moment loaded on demand followed by the widget that I wanted from app 2. Now app 3 is also going to have some very similar things going on. App 3 uses moment as well. So, and if we look in here, I share a moment between app 2 and app 3. I've got them both listed as overridables or as shareables. But the problem is, in the existing world, the host doesn't have moment. So if you run this, if you run the dynamic system host that I've got down here, you're going to see what happens. I don't think I actually include 2 copies of moment, but if you were to go into, say, app 2 and import moment, I guarantee you that moment.js will download twice when you click between show widget 1 and show widget 2. It's just not designed to handle remotes sharing stuff with other remotes without the host actually being aware. And that's really what we've resolved. So now, under this scenario, I should not see another copy of moment.js load. Excellent. All I saw was I dynamically added the remote entry that I needed, so I got the interface to connect the 2 webpack sides, and I loaded 3.2 kilobytes of code, which means that app 3 is leveraging moment.js from app 2, and the host only has shared React and React DOM. So now I have got multiple remotes that are able to share their own code in between each other. So that really explodes the capabilities that you have at hand, and it's super exciting for me because it just means I don't have to install arbitrary things into a host just to get the sharing mechanism to work, and the management aspect goes way down because even between, app 2 and 3 and stuff like this, I have my cache cleared, that's why you're seeing that, but even between these kind of things, I still have this granular control where I can say, well, you need to have this version of moment installed because that's what I have available or that's what I want. So if either of these versions bumped up, or say somebody went to moment 3, but you have 10 other remotes that still use moment 2.2x, moment 3 is going to download a fresh copy for that remote, but whoever was using moment 2 and any other remotes that come along, we're able to progressively share data between them. And also the same with moment 3. If you're in the middle of, say, a dependency upgrade, this is the perfect mechanism to support people switching major versions and it not impacting everybody or really anybody. If they happen to use it within the symver range that they're accepting, then they get to use moment 3. If the other half of your stack is still using moment 2 and the shared mechanisms have the symver available that makes it compatible, the other half will just use 1 copy of moment 2. So you don't have this sharing nightmare that you usually end up seeing. I'm going to try to actually prove out what happens when we're not doing this so you can see what we had before. I'm not really sure how familiar you are with the dynamic system. It's a bit of a niche spot, but people have asked. So I go back into here and I'm going to go cd dynamic system host. And system host was designed not to show this flaw. So we're going to design it to show it. And if I hop into just app 3, I know app 3 already loads moment. And we'll go to the widget. Alright, awesome, there it is, that's what I want. So I'm going to take this, and we're going to go into app 2. And we're going to load it in here. And what we should end up getting is, something like that. Alright, cool. So now both of them need moment. Now I'm going to go into the webpack config and I'll just add moment here. So if it's running in host mode, that's great. And if the host has moment, that's even better. And then I'm going to jump into app 3 down here and I can see it already shares moment. So we already have some kind of sharing capability going on here, but it's not going to live up to the expectations that you would want. So I'm going to run that in the meantime to keep things clean. And now what we are going to do is I'm already in dynamic system host. I'm going to go yarn start it. And before I yarn start it, let's just confirm app 1, which is the host in our case, does not have moment. There is no moment. So you're going to see the problem that we have just solved. Let's boot them. We're on 3001 already. That makes life easy. And I think it's done. Looks done to me. Cool, I loaded it. So you'll see we have some of the generals, like there's React DOM. And again, this is not using the new unreleased code. This is using what is on NPM right now. So if you're using Module Federation, you suffer from this problem you're about to see. So things happen just like usual. I'm going to clear it. I'm going to get app2's widget. Perfect. You'll notice that I had to download Moment, and yeah, I downloaded Moment pretty much. Now what you're going to notice is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to load app3. And it didn't work, probably because of some other random problem. Callback guards. Looks like a hooks issue. Alright, that is actually exactly what I would see, because one of them's using hooks, and again, the sharing mechanism is not operational, at least under this circumstance. There's some dependency in between, which is now loading a hook outside the right function body. So I'm not really going to care about any of this, because the problem that I want to show you is still very much real. Over here I've got Moment from 3002. Over here I have Moment from 3003. So that right there, and I actually have React coming from there. So there's clearly some sharing issues going on, and those sharing issues are 100% expected, because if I were to go and look inside of, the main app, there's nowhere that I actually pass the overrides. So everybody's going to load their own copy of React because nobody's telling it that it's shared. I'm just getting stuff off the window. The remote has no idea that it can be overridden, and the host doesn't understand how to override. So, 1, you see errors. 2, I'm downloading 2 different copies of Moment from 2 different sources. So that's the problem. I don't need to download 2 copies of Moment. Like, the remote had it. The other remote had it as well. Webpack already had shared out React for us, so why the hell is it loading React on its own? Because there's no override specified inside of load component. So if you wanted to work around the issue old school, boom, you'd add that. And I'd resolve it and pass it, so I manually actually write the overrides, but I'd have to do that at the host level, which makes this less dynamic than it needs to be. So you can see several issues highlighted within this kind of mechanism that we have. While it does work, you can see that there are issues with it without taking drastic manual steps. So now that you've seen it, we're going to CD back up, and we're going to look at our dynamic system again with the new Webpack API. And again, I don't want to see all this stuff. I shouldn't see all this stuff. I shouldn't see this stuff coming from different ports. It's lunacy. Cool, it loads. Pay close attention. There's React. There's React DOM. I'll turn off caching so we don't get unnecessary things like re-downloading. React DOM, the main app. I click on widget. Let's go for widget 3 to start. Cool, there's widget 3. It has Moment. The host does not have Moment. Boom. I see Moment loaded. I also see the remote entry, the entry point interface that connects the remote to the host downloaded on demand as I clicked. So it's fully dynamic. And yeah, I have some, overhead from downloading these Moment modules, and now I'm going to go and click on app 2. Based on what you just saw a moment ago, clicking on app 2 is going to re-download Moment. There we are. I downloaded the interface, the Federation interface, and I downloaded 3 kilobyte widget. That's all I did. So this is the exact example of what I have been able to provide a solution for. The only real boilerplate, again, that you need to take into consideration, and again, this is only if you're doing things super dynamic, like the end user is installing new remotes that you don't have any awareness of, and that would force you, the dashboard system or whatever, to actually rebundle it to know what the user is intending to use. You're looking for something that allows you to add and subtract remotes at runtime, and this is the golden solution to actually do that. So I know I went through a lot of code, but that's all you want. That's it. You can copy this whole code piece if you want, if you're using React, perfect, but really, and I'll set it back to default. But really, this is what you need. You need to have this little mechanism set up, and before you actually do the typical like window get or the low-level API accessors, depending on which environment you're in, you need to make sure that you initialize the sharing scope, and that when you initialize remote entry, instead of going to a get right away like you see on this next line, you go container initialize, boom, you pass in the initialization stage, which also could be a custom script that you wrote. There's not really much limit on it. So that sums up all you really need to do to have proper sharing and remote sharing with other remotes outside the scope of what the host even has installed. And with all the semantic versioning that you have in place, you can pretty much control it very, very, very well. So that ends the dynamic remote demo, but I want to show off one more, and this is going to be a deeper dive into automatic vendor sharing. So a few weeks ago, I wrote a little plugin which seems to have actually gotten a decent amount of traction. And all it was is a whole bunch of fancy loops that take your package JSON and requires the keys in your package JSON and resolves them one step lower down and actually gets the package JSON of the dependency you have, plucks the version and keys it together. It worked pretty well, but it wasn't as integrated as possible. It was kind of sugar that wraps module federation. Anyway, speaking to Tobias, showing him the code, we were able to conjure up a good use case to actually put this into the core and beef it up substantially. So we're going to look at our dynamic vendor sharing over here. Again, please do note that I am loading all of these advanced API features directly from the GitHub webpack. So you're not going to get this on NPM for at least a few more days. So let's look at app 1. And again, all I'm really demonstrating here is shared. We have changed so much more and added so much more power to everything else that's not shared. This whole video is literally me talking about one key on module federation, and there is a way more that's gone under the hood, much larger rewrites that we've actually been able to accomplish to power you more. I'm going to touch on those a little bit at the end just to give you a glimpse. So in here, everything looks the same. I get to module federation, all the same. The one call out here is, you'll notice I've started using /button to actually reference it. And the reason is because we're sort of kind of, you know, following the pattern of ES modules and ESM. And how Node 14 will handle ESM uses a similar kind of pattern. What ends up happening with this whole, you know, button thing is, the reality of it is it gets turned into this. Something like that. Webpack container remote button. So that's actually what it ends up getting converted to. But the / follows the ESM conventions that you'll have to find out what happens with ESM and Webpack. But we've built the thing to support the ESM structures that are being defined. And the reason we have the / there is it's also a very clear indicator of where do we split the context from Webpack compared to the context from the naming of the system. You still use it as button as far as, yeah, you still import, you know, app2 / button. That's not a problem. But the keys are a little bit different. So if we just have button here, it's a little harder for us to know, well, where and how and why and what's the exact location to resolve and append the Webpack container piece to the front. But having that in place gives us a lot more power and a lot more assurance that we're placing this stuff in the right place when we rewrite your identifiers under the hood. So, other than that, you'll see that I have shared. I'm going to say React's a singleton. React DOM is a singleton too. There should not be more than one copy running ever. And it should probably default to one of the newer copies. If one uses, an older one uses another one, we need to use the best available copy, and everybody has to use that. So the only cool thing that I'm calling out in this app is you see this spread operator on deps. So this is pretty much exactly what Automatic Vendor Federation plugin did, and let's see if I can pull it up. Yes. Automatic Vendor Federation, here we go. Does a bunch of basic things. And there's the use case. So you'll see shared Automatic Vendor Federation. I pass in the package JSON, I pass in some things to ignore, some things to exclude, and I have the options to say ignore the patch version, which is basically what the Webpack API looks like now. Ta-da! So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to look at what this deps thing is. So if I scroll up to the top, you'll see a good explanation on what it is, but what's really awesome is I can now just go, cool, the dependencies I want, I can go package JSON require.dependencies. So I can just say, cool, share whatever's in here. Or you could create peer dependencies or whatever object you want on here, and you could just have it share. Like, theoretically, you could go crazy and have this if you are wanting to control this from, a JSON aspect. You could create shared, require it in, as long as it follows the same versions, you're good to go. So that's really what deps does, and when it does this, it's going to also kind of restitch everything together the way that we manually have to do it. It just provides it automatically. Now, it might be a good idea to hydrate this. Sorry. It might be a good idea to hydrate this, or maybe have some custom selectors, or, if you want to deal with, say, nested paths and stuff like that, it could be handled better. One of the things that I don't think I can actually dig it up for you right now on the spot, but if there's time at the end of the video, I'll show you the groundbreaking awesomeness of tree shaking your vendors and still having them work. So that's pretty much what this puts together. When I boot it, I believe it should just, do the same thing that it always has done, which is work. But you can now see I'm sharing these things intelligently, and I'm able to set singletons, and I'm really able to set, all the fancy stuff that is here. I can create all sorts of interesting solutions. So while I'm in here, I'm going to go ahead and pull the issue out, go to the top level README, and just say read more. Just so that it's clear that you can go and actually talk and see about the implementation. But if I load up the app, which should be running now, 3001, there we go. Stock standard bidirectional host. The most basic thing in the world, but you're going to notice that I am loading these things still the correct way. I'm only loading one copy of React, they're shared, but I have the button coming from 3002, and because this is bidirectional, if I do the same, boom, everything is still shared, everything still works the right way, and I only see button from 3001 actually show up in here. So, nothing really changed compared to the normal bidirectional one, but what you get to see is that you can use the API in different ways. So this is just a small sliver of the advanced API system that we have put in place. So that really covers the two examples that I wanted to go over. I did kind of comment out a future system that you cannot use now, but you will be able to soon. And that is what happens when a remote is, a URL, or when anything is something like a URL or a promise or some other non-standard mechanism. How do you actually deal with that? So one of the big call-outs is, okay, well, do I always have to write remote entry into my HTML files? It's better because you don't have the RTT, but it's not necessarily the most flexible solution at scale. So you can either do, say, dynamic loading like we've kind of displayed in the previous example, or one of the cool things is we rewrote the externals plugin, and The externals plugin now does a whole lot more things. So what we did is we rewrote it to really meet the use cases of module federation, so we can actually use something helpful from externals other than, you know, what it did from the beginning of time. So one of the cool things that externals now has added to it is the capability to pass an external type of, say, a promise or of HTTP. So you're now able to actually load code from HTTP directly inside of the webpack mechanisms that we've designed. And specifically, it was built to support this use case you're seeing on your screen right now. And this use case is definitely the coolest part of it. I have app 2. Here's the external. I give it the key, you know, app 2, which helps us resolve certain aspects, and localhost 3002 remote entry. So now I don't need to have anything in my HTML. Just when Webpack boots itself, it'll go ahead and add the remote entries as required based on the apps that you are using. So it just takes one extra step of complexity out. The other really nice thing that you're going to see soon is we have this exposes area, and you know, we have button and stuff like that. That API is now far more extensive. So I have button and I can do import, and this works actually in the master branch right now. But the cool thing is we're going to add metadata on here. So you can actually request federated code and you can have it be delivered to you with metadata. So off the top of my head, there's two really useful cases for this. One, server-side rendering. How do you server-side render a federated system and actually flush out the JavaScript chunks that the client should have when it's ready to go, so you don't have RTTs going back and forth as different parts of your app would render. In code splitting, you'll see this a lot. Like any code split library has some kind of report or flush chunks or collect chunks or whatever. All of that's actually originally designed and developed off of a really great developer I work with and actually help maintain, Facey Spacey. He was the one who created React Universal Component, and I'm the one who's looked after it for many, many years. And that was really where the whole concept of server-side rendering code split systems came from. Facey Spacey is the inventor of every single system that you use today. If you code split and server-side render, whether it's through Next, React Loadable, any of them, this was the guy, or we were the group that developed it. So we're applying some similar kind of capabilities here. I want a server-side render button from app 2, and I'm server-side rendering app 1. So what do I need to know? I would really like to have some metadata upon payload delivery so that when I server-side render the runtime parts of it, I can also actually know, well, what's the script's location to download and send to the client so that the client has a script tag coded with the server-side rendered response that actually contains the modules I'm using from different remotes. So with this addition of this meta system, you'll be able to actually collect meta, and it should actually give you options to hydrate internal stat meta into it. It won't be anything too large, and I really wouldn't suggest getting it too large, but you're going to have the ability to have button tell you, here I am, here's my runtime, and here's extra information that might come in useful to you. The other really awesome thing that I see with this whole mechanism is, imagine how this will really help when you're doing unit testing. And now when we go into the federated world, what the hell does unit testing even look like there? One of the awesome things you could do is say you depend on another team's component or, you know, some other federated system. You could actually pull this in, federate the unit tests in, or federate the modules in there, and you could actually ship the mocks that come from the team that wrote the component. So you'd be able to implement the component into your system and pluck the mocks directly off of whoever owns this specific component and execute them under your unit test scenarios within your components to verify that you still pass your APIs correctly and that all of your props or anything else still upholds the data contract required by the federated system. So those are two really awesome examples right there of where the advanced API is going to be awesome. And soon as we merge 2 or 3 branches together so I can make a comprehensive example of a closer to end-to-end flow like I was able to do with shared, you'll definitely be seeing a video from me on it. One of the other really cool things that this mechanism gives us is we're heavily outside of Webpack, we are heavily investigating, and we've actually built some impressive stuff that will allow you to version your remotes. So when it comes down to stuff like this, it's typically just remote entry, but using the same mechanics that I've kind of showcased here, we'll be able to attach versions to these remotes. So now when it comes to rollbacks and code freezes and stuff like that, I can actually tell, say, the checkout code base to be code frozen and the product display code base to be code frozen, and I can do that through the federation system or a bigger, more powerful platform we call static orchestration, and that's literally a user interface to module federation. It lets you monitor your entire system, who uses what, when, where, and how. And inside of there, we are including the capability to pretty much bump or lock versions of remotes on a host-by-host basis. So I could say checkout is locked down, we must freeze its graph, but checkout should still continue deploying to master. And anything that's not locked down should still be able to consume the latest updates to the checkout federated system, but in production, checkout itself is running on a locked copy. So that opens up a lot of possibilities and a lot of really easy ways to do stuff like instant rollbacks and all of that. With the dashboard included, for those interested, the dashboard's really going to offer you quite literally hot reloading in production. We actually have been picking apart the hot reload API, and we're going to be applying that to server-side systems. So just to roll back something like a remote, I shouldn't have to even restart my server. I should just invoke it, and on the next invocation, it's using the new command and controlled module that the dashboard has kind of posted down or written to an environment variable or however you want to do it, but the dashboard will tell it to do something without redeploys and without restarts. So rollbacks become one click, and the actual changes that those rollbacks create will hot reload your production servers safely. For everybody who gives me the concerned look over hot reloading production, well, from me as a Webpack author and from the founder of Webpack himself, Tobias, hot reloading was actually originally created with the intent to be used in production. So the only reason we don't hot reload production is because none of you did it. Ta-da, there's the magic. So we're going to go do it, seeing as we've gotten sign off from the guy that wrote it and found out that it was designed for production and only ended up being used in development. Now when I talk about hot reloading, we are not hot reloading the front end. That's a page refresh. What I want to keep a Lambda warm and running, and I want the Lambda to get new instructions, and the next time I invoke that Lambda, it will serve new remotes. So that's the hot reloading I'm after. I want hot reloading on the server. I do not want hot reloading on the client. Hot reloading on the client is technology specific, and if you're using React, you literally proxy every React component, and it's terrible for performance, and you still can't guarantee that state will be persisted. Building a system that could do that is horribly unreliable and way more complex than anything that I'm willing to get into over a single framework. So there's the reasoning behind it, and that's where I really see hot reloading production come into play. It's not about what's in the browser, because you can page refresh the browser, but what's stuck in server memory, and how can I get server memory to use a new version of a remote when I press one button that says server B needs to use the previous version of this remote, and I want the next execution to use it. So that kind of dives into some of the aspects that I've got listed here. There's probably a whole bunch of other cool things that I have forgotten or that are buried elsewhere in the Webpack repo, but really I'm not going to actually drone on too much longer about this whole thing. This should give you a pretty cool showcased experience of what's possible, what you can do, and then I think the final part that I want to throw on here is a lot of the non-Webpack based work that we're doing in the Module Federation GitHub org is really what's going to take a very powerful tool and turn it into an enterprise system. Like, I would like Microsoft end-to-end to run off of the federated dashboard mechanism. I want it to be that scalable, that manageable, and that understandable to everybody who needs to run it. I will not really speak too much about the federated dashboard just yet, but the good thing to note is we will be releasing a read-only copy of the dashboard. We really hope that you give it a pull, you give it a try. We're still working on some refinements on it, and the scope and scale of what it will do will grow substantially within the next couple of weeks or months. A big thank you that I want to give out to Jack Harrington. If you don't know Jack Harrington, he's a great engineer, and he's really been one of the driving forces that has helped me progress the tooling aspects of module federation. The code that doesn't go into webpack, where does it go? Because we need it. And Jack's been a huge help on that whole front. And of course, I would love to just give a shout out to Marius Rousseau, who helped me write Module Federation, in conjunction, me and him up doing late nights writing it, and he of course has joined in on the fold on some of the proprietary tools or not yet released tools that we're busy building. So really guys, both of you, thank you. You've done a fantastic job, and collectively we're trying to give you as users more power, more options, and more tools so that Module Federation, while sounding cool, isn't something you need to worry about when this thing hits 1,000 repos or 10,000 developers. It should still be more or less just as simple as import what you want and it just work. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. Definitely follow me on Twitter, Scripted Alchemy. That'd be really awesome. I get a lot of questions through there, and honestly I tweet at least 5 times a day just about Module Federation, so if you really want to follow exactly what's happening, you're going to be able to see what I'm thinking, what's going on, what us in the community are working on, and you'll get the occasional glimpse at the proprietary tools or not yet ready for release tools that we are working on. So definitely check that out. And if you want, give me a subscribe here on YouTube. I'll probably be posting more often as things go. And one last call out, thank you to the people who are sponsoring me on GitHub Sponsors. It means a huge ton, and it really isn't a dollar thing that is so meaningful. It's just the support and the financial backing that really shows that people care about this. So we've got support tiers on there. If you just want to give a thanks, it would be really awesome to just consider a $5 donation. It definitely will actually help us do things like get a paid organization for Module Federation and be able to do some additional capabilities that we're kind of limited to, or kind of having to juggle between private repos or just personal repos where some of these features are free. So if anybody really believes in this, it would be super helpful if you'd consider sponsoring me through my GitHub sponsors page. And then of course, beyond that, if anybody really wants to give back and help out, and maybe funding's a little bit tight, and I totally understand that, but another huge way that you as the community could really help, if you are excited and ready to use this tech or want to use this tech, is really just spread the word. And I think one of the biggest things that would be really helpful to us is, if you've played with it at all, write a Medium article on it. DM me on Twitter if you have questions, and help us get some content out there about what this system can do. And then I guess on the last point, if you are a business, company, principal engineer, or anybody in a management level position who's seriously considering Module Federation, I do want companies to know that they are not alone. Through GitHub sponsors, and probably can set up some Stripe integration, looking at a code mentor setup as well for maybe some hourly help. But if you need really sophisticated things done, like architectural reviews or anything like that, we do have support tiers available specifically so that large companies can architect things correctly using a federated system. And I guess the one benefit or sell of why consider one of those options is I wrote the system itself. So generally anything that you need, I most likely can do or did write myself, including customizing the system heavily to be stable but still fulfill your needs. I think one cool example of that would be through a collaborative effort with our other main contributors, we were able to take webpack and actually turn the entire federated system into a streamed mechanism, which means that inside of a Lambda, if I chose to, I can stream code directly out of Akamai, I can stream code directly off of S3, and that's just insanely powerful when now you're dealing in very sandboxed environments, and I'm literally streaming software over the wire and running it. So that's one of the cool things that we've kind of conjured up, and honestly that wasn't a very hard one to do. So if you have really bespoke needs, definitely get hold of me on Twitter, get hold of me through email, and of course, if you can, willing, passionate, or able to, give me a click on the sponsors page, and just anything helps. So thank you, and more to come soon.